Here in the Nigerian capital, Abuja, a High Court judge has adjourned the terrorism and treason trial of the detained secessionist leader Nnamdi Kanu after he was not presented in court. The prosecution did not explain the absence of the leader of the proscribed group, the Indigenous People of Biafra, but Mr. Kanu's lawyers said they were worried about his safety, and there's been considerable international concern. The trial will now start in October. At least 7 people, possibly more, were arrested for protesting outside the High Court where Mr. Kanu was supposed to appear. There was tight security with roads blocked off and access severely restricted. There are also reports of protests in parts of the southeast. Mr. Kanu had been on the run for 4 years after skipping bail. He holds British citizenship, and the circumstances of his extradition back to Nigeria last month are still unclear.
Nnamdi Kanu we are talking about today is a person that was abducted in Kenya on July 19th, on June 19, 2021, then tortured, subjected to all forms of inhuman treatment and degradation, inflicted with grievous bodily harms, which is still in his body today. So after spending 8 days, after subjecting him to all sorts of torture, then he was handed over to Nigerian security agents 8 days after. So on the 29th, they brought him to court. So what I'm saying is that we are talking about gross violation of Geneva Convention Protocol, which agreement Nigeria entered into in 2001. This is very fundamental because as far as we are concerned today, Nigeria's image in international community has been damaged, has been bastardized by virtue of what has taken place. We don't go to a foreign land and kidnap somebody. If the person has committed an offense to law, you subject him through what they call extradition proceedings. Then the person will pass through the instead of smuggling here through what they call extraordinary rendition. But that's a very fundamental issue we're discussing before international court and the international community. For the past 8 days, we don't have him, we don't see him. And only yesterday, we had over the social media that has been taken away from Abuja. I complained to the court that he has been taken away from here. And we can't confirm his present state of health. So the court has to intervene and give directive to the detention authority that we should have access to him on specified dates within a week.
Nnamdi Kanu's lawyer there. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the international editor of Private Eye, the UK's current affairs magazine, Antony Goldman, who's been following the case and who has reported extensively on Nigeria for the BBC and the Financial Times, and by Arise political editor and director of news, Sumner Sambo, who was in court earlier in the day. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'll start with you, Sumner. Just bring us the day. What happened in court today?
Well, actually, the prosecution brought this issue up in court today. And when Nnamdi Kanu was presented in court last time, immediately after he was brought in here, the judge had actually said that there was going to be a shift in the procedures. First of all, the case will be hastened, and then secondly, he will be in court today.
That's when he was brought in last month.
Last month, right. after the extraordinary rendition, yeah. And eventually, when the case started today, we had the State Council informing the judge, Justice Binta Aniagolu, that he wasn't present in court because of logistics problems. And secondly, since the judges are embarking on vacation from today till September 17, he's asking that the case should be shifted. And the judge was asking why he wasn't in court, because the last time the Nigerian government brought him to court, they actually sought for this case to be hastened up. So she was kind of like surprised. But she insisted that the right thing should be done. And the right thing here is that if this case must be heard at the moment, she is not a vacation judge. So the prosecution counsel will have to apply to her and her superiors, that's the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, asking that she be appointed a vacation judge for her to continue the case, or another vacation judge would have to be appointed. And eventually, when these issues were brought in place, the defense counsel said no. He didn't know why his client was not in court, because for the past 10 days, he's been unable to meet with his client. What exactly is responsible for the absence of his client in court? That's Nnamdi Kanu. Well, the prosecution counsel couldn't give enough information other than what he had said previously. Right. So in all of this, 3 orders were given by the judge. Firstly, Justice Binta Aniagolu said that this trial cannot go on in the absence of Nnamdi Kanu, because she is aware that Nnamdi Kanu has been brought to the country. He was brought in to her courtroom the other time. That was in June.
So he clearly is in Nigeria.
Yeah, so he's clearly is in Nigeria, and he's within the facility, the DSS facility that she had ordered that he should be held last time. So if that's the case, her previous judgment, court order that she had issued, so to say, which was that Nnamdi Kanu will be tried in his absence, has been set aside. So until he's present, this case can't move forward. Right. Then the second order was that this prosecution counsel will have to seek the permission of the chief judge of the Federal High Court for her to sit as a vacation judge or someone else. Then the third order is that the defense counsel, that's Ifeanyi Ejiofor and then Aloy Ejimako, who are both lawyers for Nnamdi Kanu, should be allowed to see Nnamdi Kanu. The lawyer, defense lawyer, had said that he had wanted Nnamdi Kanu to be taken to a correctional facility, Kuje prison. She insisted that he would still have to be detained at the detention facility of the Department of State Service. So in a nutshell, it was a win-win situation for both parties, because now Nnamdi Kanu's lawyers can have access to him fully. But the judge was very apt in saying, according to her, that yes, she's granting an order for him to be seen, but not at any time, because she has received information from the DSS that the lawyers just want to walk in at any time that they feel like. Right. So in a nutshell, she said specific days of the week, at least twice in a week, he must be seen by his lawyers.
Thank you very much indeed for that summary. Let me bring you in, Antony Goldman. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Mr. Kanu, of course, a well-known figure in Nigeria. Some see him as a hero, others a villain. He's been a thorn in the side of the Nigerian government, it's fair to say, since 2009. What's being made of him and his case internationally, particularly in the UK, where he's a citizen?
Well, I think that there has been some noise in the UK. Obviously, there's a diaspora community in the UK that has protested, and the questions have been asked. And one of the members of the House of Lords has asked the government to explain this week what it knows about the situation, what it intends to do about the situation. There's been pressure on the Foreign Commonwealth Office to intervene. It's as you mentioned earlier, Nnamdi Kanu is a British citizen as well as a Nigerian citizen, and dual nationality creates certain challenges around the jurisdiction, in the sense that typically if you are a national of two countries and you're in trouble in one of them, the other country doesn't intervene. But in this case, perhaps there are issues over where the story started, if you like. If it happened in a third country, maybe Britain might feel that it had something to say about it. It's a delicate issue for Britain, because although Kenya has denied any involvement in this affair, and the Nigerian government has said nothing about the affair, the allegation from Nnamdi Kanu's lawyers that there has been extraordinary rendition throws memories back to Britain and America's historic role earlier this century in extraordinary rendition from Iraq, and terror suspects going around the world, and torture. And in fact, not just historically, even currently, there's pressure on the British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab to intervene in an unrelated case in Somalia of a British man who alleges that he has been tortured in Somalia at the request of other countries, and that Britain hasn't intervened. So it does create some issues around it for a lot of people.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Let me bring you back in, Sumner. He's been charged with all kinds of crimes. I mean, there's been a wave of attacks in the southeast on government facilities, on security personnel. The government accuses him of instigating the violence, but he hasn't had his day in court yet, and he is still presumed innocent until found guilty, according to Nigerian law.
Yes, very interesting indeed. I mean, a lot of people within the courts, especially his supporters who flooded the courts today, kept insisting that Nnamdi Kanu is innocent, that the federal government doesn't have proof against him, that he ordered the destruction of facilities, and that he is popular. He's actually fighting for a Biafran state, and the Constitution guarantees him that right. The international laws actually guarantee him those rights, and if that is the case, the government will have to do more to convince Nigerians that Nnamdi Kanu actually gave those orders for the destruction of state facilities like the Independent National Electoral Commission offices, police stations, correctional facilities, and all of that. So it's a very tough time for the Nigerian government. And then one thing actually...
But obviously, quite aside from what the protesters are saying, yes. I mean, it would have to be proven in court.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be proven that, he gave these orders and all of that. The government lawyers were actually insisting that in all of this, he is like the spiritual leader of the movement of IPOB. And if that's the case, they actually take cue from whatever he says.
Yeah, and that his broadcasts, responsibility.
Yes, that his broadcasts are there. And he was actually saying most of these things on live broadcasts, on social media and all of that, on his Radio Biafra and all of that. So in all, it's left to be seen what other proof the Nigerian government will bring to bear to ensure that it establishes this case against him. But a lot of people think that he's actually speaking the minds of a lot of people in the Southeast, and that it's more of like a freedom fighter, a liberator. So if he's a liberation activist, then his lawyers would also have to prove that he didn't issue direct orders to his supporters to actually engage in this destruction of facilities.
Okay, we've got about 30 seconds before we have to take a break, but we'll come back and keep chatting. What about the process of his arrest and return to Nigeria, Anthony? I mean, you mentioned it briefly. Is that something that concerns the British government?
Well, I think at the moment we're dealing with allegations. And the British High Commission here has said that they want to engage with the process, but thus far I'm not sure that they've made much progress.
Well, they said they wanted to offer consular services. What does that mean?
Well, consular service typically means that they would advise on process, that they would that make sure that the prisoner is looked after properly, that that there's representation and those kind of support that you would provide for your own citizen. But that typically isn't as easy when the citizen has nationality of another country. And I think that as you said, this basically comes down to what's going to be heard in court, and allegations outside court are quite different.
We'll come back and talk a bit more about that. Please stay with us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the trial of the detained secessionist leader Nnamdi Kanu, which has been adjourned. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, as you might have heard, a High Court judge in Nigeria has adjourned the terrorism and treason trial of the detained secessionist leader Nnamdi Kanu after he was not presented to the court. The prosecution did not explain the absence of the leader of the banned group, Indigenous People of Biafra, but his lawyers said they were worried about his safety. The trial will now start on the 21st of October. Earlier, at least 7 people, possibly more, were arrested for holding a protest outside the court. Mr. Kanu had been wanted by the authorities since skipping bail and fleeing the country in 2017. He holds British and Nigerian citizenship, and the circumstances of his extradition back to Nigeria last month are still unclear. And with me in the studio, the international editor of Private Eye, the UK's current affairs magazine, Antony Goldman, who's been following the case, and by Arise director of news, Sumner Sambo, who was in court earlier in the day. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. And I'll come back to you, Antony, because you were completing a thought. We were talking about Nnamdi Kanu, his second country being Britain, saying that it plans to provide consular assistance to Mr. Kanu, and you were explaining to us what form that is likely to take, if at all.
Well, I think that there are some circumstances in which consular support is provided to citizens of the country in which they also hold nationality, but it's quite rare, and it certainly wouldn't be typically in a case involving terrorism or national security. Although over the years, Britain has had, or certainly the Nigerian government has perceived Britain as having quite an ambiguous position on Nnamdi Kanu and IPOB. There was advice given by the British Home Office last year to asylum seekers, which basically kind of made the case that if you wanted, if you arrived in Britain and said you were a separatist, you would perhaps be able to argue the case for receiving political asylum on the basis of persecution. And there's been quite a strong lobby in the UK, particularly based around the evangelical Christian movement, alleging that there is a process of persecution. Again, obviously, strongly denied and by government and with evidence quite often of quite a partial and unbalanced nature, it seems. But it's certainly a strong lobby, and I think that that's why this is something that resonates and touches a raw nerve, particularly for government here, which looks at some of the things that have gone on, the people that have been killed, the destruction of property, and points to open source material that is easily available on the internet that they suggest is an illustration of incitement. So I think that the lines are fairly clearly drawn here.
Let me bring you in, Sumner Sambo. You were in court. You've been following this case. His lawyers say he was tortured and chained to the floor in Kenya for 8 days, a charge which the Kenyan authorities have denied. I mean, what are you hearing about that?
Well, those are allegations for now, because in court, his lawyer, FI Ejiofor, was saying that he's not been able to see Nnamdi Kanu for 10 days now, and he believes that Nnamdi Kanu is still undergoing torture at the hands of the DSS, and saying that if not, he should have been allowed to see him. And one other of his lawyers, a lawyer Ejimako, had said that he was previously allowed to see Nnamdi Kanu, but since then it was just discretionary.
Well, this is purely anecdotal, and I apologize for interrupting you, but I mean, there have been suggestions and some reports that the reason he didn't appear in court today is because the DSS are trying to extract as much information from him that they can use against him.
Yes, I mean, it was very clear even in court. We actually heard lots of things, lots of information, people telling us that it looks like it's a deliberate state strategy to ensure that this hearing doesn't hold today, because they just felt that they should still have him more so that they will extract some sort of information from him and all of that, because if not, there was no reason why he shouldn't have been brought to court. I mean, from the DSS detention facility to where the court is located.
But you have to wonder
about 2-3 kilometers.
But you have to wonder why they didn't just apply to the court to say we're not going to be able to. I mean,
that's why we're actually surprised when the DSS was saying that they are unable to bring him due to logistics issues, and it will also get down to the allegations being raised by Nnamdi Kanu's lawyer that he may have been undergoing torture. Could it have also been that maybe due to the torture he's unable to stand on his feet, or
because
that
obviously fuels speculation.
Yes, and in court there was a delegation of the Ohanese Ndigbo, which was represented by Chief Chukwuemeka.
That's the socio-cultural organization from the southeast.
From southeast of the country, represented by Chief Chukwuemeka Ezife, who's an old-time governor of Anambra State in the southeast. And at a point in time, when we were interviewing Ezife, he called him my son. And a lot of us journalists laughed, because this was even the same Nnamdi Kanu who was hitting hard at the Ohanese Ndigbo, and they're hitting hard at some of the Igbo elders, telling them that why is it that they don't want to support IPOB's decision to actually break out of the country. And these elders are saying that no, despite all that you've done, we are still your father, or your fathers in this case. So I mean, a lot of us were taken aback, and there was a mild drama that played out in court. Actually, we had thought that because of the tense nature of the hearing, that a lot of people would be very rigid, but the judge was at peace with herself and even his lawyers. And the judge, while introducing some other group of lawyers that came into court, calling themselves Igbo lawyers, that's lawyers representing the southeastern part of the country, about 5,000 of them, based in Abuja here, she was like, why am I not a part of those Igbo lawyers forum? Because I'm actually from Enugu State myself. And a lot of us were taken aback, considering her name.
Yes,
and she's actually married to a northerner and all of that. So a lot of people were laughing in court. So it helped to calm the tensed atmosphere. And in all of this, the failure of the DSS to actually provide Nnamdi Kanu in court gave room for some of the suspicion.
Absolutely.
That, something may have been happening. Just like the lawyer had said that the Kenyan authorities tortured him, and maybe the Nigerian authorities are torturing him.
That's why, purely speculative.
Yeah, but it's all speculative until we get the facts.
Let me bring you in, Anthony. You've covered Nigeria extensively. I mean, you were a correspondent for the BBC, the Financial Times. You were here all the way from military rule into civilian rule. What do you think are the issues that are fueling separatist agitation in Nigeria?
Well, I think, first, just to say, I think that there is an element of courtroom drama lends itself to an element of theatre everywhere, and I think Nigeria is no different in that regard. I can't think of the number of times, the high-profile cases over the years, where it's built up to a big day, something's going to happen, and then it's delayed and postponed. You know, for weeks. And this is not unusual. Lawyers, I think, have a way of operating that typically lends itself to this kind of behaviour. But park that for a moment. I mean, the issue of secession, I think, in Nigeria is not particularly different from other parts of the world when there is a sense that a space opens up in a country, the failure to satisfactorily deliver the basics in terms of security, in terms of the provisions of goods and services. You will find movements that appear actually sometimes to undermine or to exacerbate those fault lines, if you like, to create more space for themselves. So the issue is there. You put further pressure on the system. You say, look how bad the situation now is. We're the only ones that can come in. You might find in I don't know, in Central America, drugs cartels absolutely destroying the state, and then being the ones that hand out crumbs off the table in terms of healthcare and education. So I think that it does highlight the broader challenge of governance in Nigeria, and the challenge of bringing in stakeholders to emphasise the common good. I mean, I'm from Britain, and when Leicester City won the FA Cup, one of the footballers, one of the Nigerian footballers, whose family came from the east of the country, walked up to collect his medal with a green, white and green flag, on his shoulders. So that these are issues. And when you mentioned before that, some of the very people who maybe now are defending Nnamdi Kanu were some of the people who Nnamdi Kanu was most angry at, it highlights actually how fluid and flexible sometimes some of these pressures can be. Okay,
let me give you the last word, Sumner Sambo. We've got about 15 seconds. Do you think Nnamdi Kanu's trial is likely to end the separatist agitation, the quest for Biafra?
It will be very difficult, because it's a political question that Nigeria has been running away from. And so until there's a deliberate effort by the Nigerian government to ensure that there is a fundamental touching of the Nigerian constitution to help out, it will be a difficult situation.
Sumner Sambo, Antony Goldman, thank you very much.